all for coming. I'm very excited about these shiurim because over the years I have been picking some ideas that I don't know somehow developed in my mind about Hanukkah. And I realized that Hanukkah is a very peculiar festival. On the one hand, it is the last one to develop in our history as a people. But as we are going to see next week, in next week's shiur, it is actually the most ancient one in our calendar. So at the same time, it is the newest and most ancient. And what I'd like to explore throughout the three shiurim that we're going to have this week, next week, and the week after that, the last one is going to be on Hanukkah itself. Oh, they even have another. Okay. Oh, this is wonderful. All couples here are sharing. I'm sorry. Oh, good, good, wonderful, wonderful. Because I did print enough. So, okay. So there you go. So in the next three shiurim, we're going to explore Hanukkah. We're going to discuss the history, the halachot, and the meaning of all of these together. And through that, I think, get to what at least for me was a new understanding of what Hanukkah is all about. So what are we going to do today? Today we're going to discuss the candles. And my question is, which I'm going to explore during the next 41 minutes, is why candles? Why, when Chazal established Hanukkah, they decided this is how we're going to celebrate it, by lighting candles. Now you think, well, what do you mean? The answer is obvious, the miracle. But we will see that there's another version in our sources. And according to that version, my question is a very good question. And once I'm going to establish my question according to that alternative version of the Hanukkah story or narrative, let's call it, then I'm going to go back to the one that we do know and show you that actually the question is a good question, even according to the narrative that we all know from kindergarten. And it is actually a very good question. That is what we're going to explore today. Why candles? So if I know nothing about Hanukkah, and I just walk into a place that are celebrating Hanukkah, my first encounter with Hanukkah is going to be while davening Ma'ariv before lighting the Chanukiah. And while I'm going to daven Ma'ariv, I'm going to read Al Anisim, and in Al Anisim, I'm going to read what Hanukkah is all about, and that is the first source that we have. And I will see there that we are thanking Hashem על הניסים ועל הפורקן ועל הגבורות ועל התשועות ועל הנפלאות ועל המלחמות שעשית לאבותינו בימים ההם בזמן הזה. All the wonderful things we're thanking Hashem. What are we thanking Hashem? For the miracles, for the salvation, for the might, for the another word for salvation, I suppose, for the wonders, for the battles that Hashem had done to our ancestors these days at antiquity. And then we go and we tell the story, etc., etc., the whole story of the Seleucidites, right? From Syria, the Hellenist empire, the Hellenist northern empire that were forcing us to forget our Torah and try to assimilate us, and some of our brethren also were joining them, and we stood against everyone, and we were few and weak, but somehow Hashem miraculously had us win against those amongst us that were for the Hellenists and against the Hellenists themselves, and eventually Hashem did to us a tshu'ah gdola, and then came your sons to Litvir Beitecha, to Beit HaMikdash, and we fixed it up, because after all, Beit HaMikdash, right, Ufinu et eichalecha v'tiyaru et mikdashecha, the temple was made by the Mityavnim into a pantheon to the Greek gods. So now we had to clean up all of Beit HaMikdash and rebuilt many parts of it, the Mizbeach and other parts, as we will soon see. And והדליקו נרות בחצרות קודשך וקבעו 8 ימי חנוכה אלו להודות ולהלל לשמך הגדול. What there is no explanation for. Okay, so it mentions candles, but okay, it's one of the many things that are mentioned, but the main thing seems to be, the main essence of Hanukkah is thanking Hashem for the great miracles, which seem to be, the miracles seem to be the Rabim Beyad Me'atim, the fact that the few managed to defeat the many, right? That is the main essence of what we thank Hashem here for. And we mentioned candles, but it's the Chagav. And then the Kav'u Shmonat Yemei Chanukah Elu, these 8 days of Hanukkah were established, but again, it doesn't say what they were established for, right? So I have them, so why not give them out? If I won't give it out, then I'll feel bad that I printed them. So what is it for? How did we get to 8 days? So now my question is not only why candles, but also why 8 days? I see none of the answers in Al Nisim. So then I go and I read the Rambam. Okay, but before I read the Rambam, the one that was there in Al Nisim will then go on and go to his to his host, and he will see, oh, just a minute, they're lighting candles. Interesting. Why are they lighting candles? What does that have to do with anything? Okay, maybe it has to do with something, but why? They wouldn't understand. Okay, so then maybe they'll ask the people, the family they're at, why is it that we're lighting candles? And the family will say, well, let's sit down and look. So they'll open the Rambam, and then they'll read the following. Look at line 15. Is if you look at the left, there are numbers. So if you look at line 15, that's the Rambam, Halacha Aleph. So the Rambam tells us in Hilchot Chanukah, the 3rd chapter, the 1st halacha, Bebait Sheni, during the Second Temple era. Kshemalchu Yavan gazul zerot al Yisrael v'tlu datam. So they had bad decrees that they have decreed over Israel and annulled their religion, meaning they didn't allow Jews to live according to Torah and to carry out the mitzvot. And they also forced us to pay high taxes, and they violated Jewish women, and they took over the temple, and basically the Rambam alludes to them turning the temple into a Greek temple. There was a big statue of Zeus, right? Maybe on top of the Mizbeach, maybe next to the Mizbeach. Yes, and other Greek gods probably. וצר להם לישראל מאוד מפניהם, ולחצום לחץ גדול, עד שריחם עליהם אלוהי אבותינו, והושיעם מידם, והצילם, וגברו בני חשמונאי הכהנים הגדולים, והרגום, והושיעו ישראל מידם, והעמידו מלך מן הכהנים, וחזרה מלכות לישראל יתר על 200 שנה, עד החורבן השני. Then there was this great battle, and Hashem had mercy on us, and Israel, led by the great Kohanim Agdolim from the family of the Chashmonaim, managed to overtake the Hellenists, and they reestablished their kingdom for a period of over 200 years. So it's not so clear how the Rambam got to such a long period of 200 years, but there are different calculations of how to get there. Okay, but until the second destruction of the second temple. Then Halacha Bet. So far the Rambam is telling us the story of the great battle and victory of Hanukkah. And then he continues, וכשקבעו ישראל על אויביהם ואיבדום, בחמישה ועשרים בחודש כסלו היה. So the victory was won on the 25th of Kislev. So it depends what you consider victory, because the battles against the Hellenists continued later on, and in fact, there were more even after than before. But something happened on the 25th of Kislev. They came into the temple and were able to purify it. ונכנסו להיכל ולא מצאו שמן טהור במקדש אלא פח אחד ולא היה בו להדליק אלא יום אחד בלבד והדליקו ממנו נרות המערכה 8 ימים עד שקדשו זיתים והוציאו שמן טהור. That is what we all know, the miracle of Hanukkah. There was only one small jug that was good for one day. All the rest of the oils were defiled by the Hellenists and their followers, and therefore they had only this one jug, and they were able to light. They lit from it, and instead of lighting for only one day, it lasts for 8 days. ומפני זה התקינו חכמים שבאותו הדור שיהיו 8 הימים האלו שתחילתן מליל 25 בכסלו ימי שמחה והלל. ומדליקים בהם הנרות בערב על פתחי הבתים בכל לילה ולילה מ8 הימים להראות ולגלות הנס. And therefore it has been established by the rabbis that is how we celebrate Hanukkah. To remember that great miracle that this small jug remained for 8 days. וימים אלו הן הנקראים חנוכה והן אסורים בהספד ותענית כימי הפורים והדלקת הנרות בהם מצווה מדבי סופרים קריאת המגילה. It's a great mitzvah, and that is what we do. That is Hanukkah. Okay, now where does the Rambam know this from? The Rambam knows this from, we didn't make it up, it's in the Gemara. The Gemara asks, Mai Hanukkah detanu Rebanan. Our rabbis taught us. Now this is a quote in the Talmud from a book called Megillat Ta'anit. Megillat Ta'anit is probably the most ancient book that we have in our tradition, that is part of our tradition on the one hand, but is not part of the Tanakh. Okay? So there were many books that were written that were not part of the Tanakh, but they're all considered Sfarim Chitzoniyim, the outer books that are not part of our tradition, and we sometimes might want to read what they say because it teaches us a bit about ourselves, but they're not authorized books or they're not part of our canon. Now, Megillat Ta'anit is not part of the Tanakh, but somehow it's part of the canon in some way, one way or another. Okay, and what is Megillat Ta'anit? Megillat Ta'anit is basically a list of dates. During the Second Temple, they had dates on which you shouldn't mourn. Why not? Because various things, these are national days on which victories happen or there were happy occasions, and to remember them on those days, we don't mourn. Now, among those dates are the days of Hanukkah, and that is what it says. Now, there were lots of dates. Most of those dates we don't celebrate until in our days. We'll soon see at the last source, when we'll get there, we'll see that most dates that are mentioned in Megillat Ta'anit, we don't celebrate our days, but only 2. What are the 2 dates that are mentioned in Megillat Ta'anit that we do celebrate today? Hanukkah and Purim. Very good. Those are the 2 dates. Now, there are many other dates. Did you ever hear about Yom Nikanor? Yeah, but we don't celebrate Yom Nikanor today, right? We don't celebrate it, but it's mentioned. It's a day. Something happened on that day. Not too clear. Different versions. Okay, even on Hanukkah, it's not too clear what happened, as we will soon see. But all those dates we disregard today for a reason that we are soon going to see. But Hanukkah, for some reason, we do keep. But in that book, the Tanu Rabbanan, in Megillat Ta'anit, what does it say? Bekafei bechislev, Yomei de Hanukkah, Timnia Inun, the days of Hanukkah are 8, Delo lemisped behon, udelo leitanot behon. Okay, so you shouldn't carry eulogies on this day, and you shouldn't fast. We don't mourn on these days. These are happy 8 days. Why? And now there's an explanation. שכשנכנסו יוונים להיכל, טימאו כל השמנים שבהיכל, וכשגברה מלכות בית חשמונאי וניצחום, בדקו ולא מצאו אלא פח אחד של שמן שהיה מונח בחותמו של כהן גדול, ולא היה בו אלא להדליק יום אחד. נעשה בו נס, והדליקו ממנו 8 ימים, לשנה אחרת קבעום ועשאום ימים טובים בהלל והודאה. So, when the Hellenists came into the sanctuary and defiled all the oils that were there, later when the monarchy of the Hashmonaim won over and gained victory over them, they seeked and couldn't find but one jug of oil that was sealed with the seal of the Kohen Gadol. This probably means the Kohen Gadol that was there before the Hellenist Kohanim Gadolim, because the few high priests before the Hashmonaim came into the temple were pagans. Well, they were of Jewish descent, but right, Hellenized Jews, right? We have Yason and Menelaus. You could hear from their names that they're not really well. Later, also the Hashmonaim were called right, Orcanus, Aristobulus, so also Greek names, but these are the bad Greek names. Okay, so they were totally Hellenists, and they turned the temple, and they were part of those that turned the temple into a pagan place. But the Kohanim that were there before, they probably a trustworthy Kohen was there. He sealed one of these shmanim, and it was hid somewhere. They couldn't find it, and since it was sealed, they knew it was still okay, and they were able to use it. Okay, and the miracle was that it lasts for 8 days, although it contained oil for only 1 day. Great miracle, wonderful. This is the source of the Rambam. Note, the source of Megillat Ta'anit started Bekafhei Bekislev, Yomei Dechanuka Timnia Inun, Delo lemisped behon, Udelo lehitanot behon. In what language was that? In what language was what I just read? What language was that? Aramaic, right? Now the Megillat Ta'anit continues. שכשנכנסו יוונים להיכל, טימאו כל השמנים שבהיכל, וכשגבה מלכות בית חשמונאי וניצחום, בדקו ולא מצאו אלא פח אחד של שמן שהיה מונח בחותמו של כהן גדול, etc. What language was that in? That was Hebrew. So what happened? We have a source. It gave us the date and what we must do on that date in Aramaic, and then the explanation it gave in Hebrew. Why is that? What's going on here? So, sorry?
They don't want the neighbors to understand the going. I don't know.
Maybe. So let's see. So the Khatam Sofer, and I'm now. Let's look at the second page. Look at line 12. Line 12 in the second page. So that is the Khatam Sofer. The Khatam Sofer writes, נראה לי כתרי מגילת תענית הווה. He says, I think that there are 2 Megillot Ta'anit. What does that mean? So we write, he explains what he means. אחד, מה שכתבו חנניה בן חזקיה וסיעתו. So the tradition is that the one who wrote, or those who were responsible in compiling Megillat Ta'anit, which again is a list of days on which we do not mourn, was a person named Hananiah ben Chizkiah and his helpers. They were a committee headed by Hananiah ben Chizkiah. They put together Megillat Ta'anit, the original Megillat Ta'anit. ואותו, that original Megillat Ta'anit, היה מקובל אצל חז"ל כאין ספרי המקרא. It had the status of nearly one of the Tanakh books. It was a book written b'Megillah, and that's why V'amwalav diktiv b'Megillat Ta'anit. When it's quoted, sometimes the Gemara will say it is written in Megillat Ta'anit because it was a scroll and it was written. Omnam, indeed, עוד אחרת הייתה מדורות שלאחריהם. Then there was an addition from later generations שהיה כאין ברייתא מסודרת לפרש מקראי מגילת תענית הנ"ל. ועליה נאמר תניא במגילת תענית. Then there was another part to Megillat Tanit, in addition, that was written in later generations as an explanation to those dates. Because when the dates were put together, maybe everyone knew what they were about, but then a few generations later, people began to forget what these days are about. So someone wrote an explanation of those dates. And those explanations might have not been written. I just said written, but maybe they weren't written. But like the rest of the Torah Shebe'al Peh at the time, they were chanted by heart. So part of those chanting were these explanations of Megillat Tanit. Tanya. Tanya means it is said. So when the Talmud quotes a Tanaic source, it says Tanya or Tnan if it's the Mishnah, but that means to say that it was a Tanaitic source, like any other Tanaitic source that was chanted by heart. ועל אותן ברייתות אפשר שיחלוק תנא עליהם, כי יאמר שלא כיוונה מסדר האמת בכוונת הקרא של מגילת תענית. Now the Khatam Sofer has another point. He says, we find no dispute about the dates themselves in Megillat Tanit, because they were written down, they were clear, everyone knew those dates. There were no disputes as regarding to when are those dates. But we do find disputes. We find baitot sometimes that give different explanations to these days. So he says it must be that part was of later, meaning later on they began to forget what these days are all about, and different explanations were given. And regarding those explanations, we could find disputes. So now the Khatam Sofer, why does he saw what we just saw in Masechet Shabbat, and he sees the part written in Aramaic, and he sees the part written in Hebrew, and he would say the part written in Aramaic, that's the original Megillat Ta'anit. The lingua franca, when Megillat Ta'anit was written, very close to when the people of Babel came to the land of Israel. The right parts of Sefer Nehemiah and the book of Daniel, in what language they're written? Aramaic, because that was the language that the Jews spoke those days. So also Megillat Ta'anit was written in Aramaic. Later on, the scholars in Israel developed that, or maybe they maintained it already before, but they had this Hebrew, this clear Hebrew that they discussed, that they would speak, and that is called Leshon Chachamim. The Mishnah is written in that Hebrew, the Baitot are written in that Hebrew, and so too the explanation of Megillat Ta'anit is written in that Hebrew. So we have Megillat Ta'anit. The part of it is the original ancient part is written in Aramaic, and then we have the explanation in Hebrew, says the Khatam Sofer. Now, there's a discovery of the Khatam Sofer, but today all scholars will tell you, of course that's true, because today we have manuscripts, ancient manuscripts of Megillat Ta'anit, of the actual Megillat Ta'anit, not only the sources in the Talmud, but the actual Megillat Ta'anit. And what we actually have three different baitot, meaning the actual dates in all the Megillot, in all the sources that we have are really the same. The Khatam Sofer was right, but the explanations differ. We have one source. Now, this baitot of Megillat Ta'anit is called Skolyon. The reason why it's called Skolyon, that's what the people at the time called it. In Greek, Skolyon means, like, it comes from, right, when we say scholar, we mean someone who knows things. So Skolyon means the explanation, the interpretation of the original text. So we have the dates, and then we have the Skolyon, the interpretations of these dates, and we have three different sets of interpretations. We have we have from ancient manuscripts. We have one version. We have version 1, version 2. Version 3 is probably a combination of version 1 and 2. Okay, so the Gemara, when it quotes a version of the Baita, but then we have another version which I want to look at. ב-25 ביום חנוכה תמני היומין. I'm now reading at the very bottom of the first page. ב-25 ביום חנוכה תמני היומין דלא למספד בהון. Okay, so that is the beginning of the second version. So the first line is more or less the same date, same halacha. Okay, but now the explanation. ומה ראו לעשות חנוכה 8 ימים? Okay, why 8 days? Okay, so according to the version that we saw before, well, of course, 8 days is because the miracle was 8 days. Okay. But now the question is like this. והלא חנוכה שעשה משה במדבר לא עשה אלא 7 ימים. שנאמר, ומפתח אוהל מועד לא תצאו 7 ימים, ואומר, וים הקריב ביום הראשון את קורבנו, ובשביעי הקריב אפרים. Okay. It says, so first of all, the assumption of this baita is that this Hanukkah that we're talking about, like in Ma'oz Tzul that we all sing, is Chanukkat HaMizbeach. Hanukkah in Hebrew means dedication. So the dedication of the Mizbeach during the days of Moshe, when Moshe dedicated the Mizbeach and the Mishkan that he built, it was a 7-day dedication. So says the Baita here. Then Hanukkah is a rededicating of the temple because it was turned into a pagan temple. Now we are rededicating it to Hashem. So how long? So let's look at the, how do you say, takdim? The precedents that we have in history of when there were dedications. So the first one was that of Moshe. How many days? 7 days. Okay, now let's move on. We had another one that we know of. וכן מצינו בחנוכה שעשה שלמה. I'm now in line number 5 at the beginning. שלא עשה אלא 7 ימים שנאמר כי חנוכת המזבח עשו 7 ימים וחג 7 ימים. Also the dedication of King Solomon, Shlomo HaMelech, when he dedicated Beit HaMikdash, how long was it? 7 days. So, מה ראו לעשות חנוכה זו 8 ימים. So why is it that all of a sudden here we have a Hanukkah of 8 days? It should be 7 days. Then it would make sense, according to precedent. Ella, however, what happened now? בימי מלכות יוון נכנסו בני חשמונאי להיכל. During the days of the Hellenists, the sons of Hashmonai came into the sanctuary. ובנו את המזבח. And they needed to rebuild the Mizbeach. The Mizbeach was defiled. It was, yes, they offered pigs to Zeus on the Mizbeach. They can't now take that same Mizbeach and now start doing korbanot. They have to take away, in other places the Gemara says they took apart the Mizbeach. They couldn't throw away the stones because the stones were holy, because this was the original Mizbeach that was there before it became pagan, but now they can't use it because it was then used for pagan use. So they have to take it apart and bury those stones somewhere and rebuild the new Mizbeach in its place. ובנו את המזבח, וסדו בסיד, then they have to plaster it, right, make it nice, ותקנו בו כלי שרת, and create new utensils with which to serve on the Mizbeach. All that takes time. How long did it take it? Them, והיו מתעסקים בו 8 ימים. It took them 8 days. So we celebrate 8 days, not because of the Hanukkah. It's not the historical precedent. It's just, it took them 8 days to do the Mizbeach. That's why we do it. Okay, so it is the Mizbeach that they dedicated, and it took them 8 days. So, okay, so I know why 8 days. But why candles, according to this version? According to this version, it shouldn't be candles. It should be what? How do we celebrate our Yom Ha'atzmaut today? Barbecue. So what do you do on the Mizbeach? Barbecue. So that's what we should do, 8 days of barbecue. But we don't do 8 days of barbecue. We do 8 days of lighting candles. So, are you vegan?
No, I think we can't have carved donuts.
Oh, yes. Okay. So, because of that could be a good reason. That could be a good reason. But anyhow, but we don't do barbecues. We light candles. So why? So the explanation goes on. So why light candles? So goes on the explanation, אלא בימי מלכות יוון, שנכנסו בית חשמונאי להיכל, 7 שיפודין של ברזל בידם, וחיפום בעץ, והדליקו בהם את המנורה. They had, indeed, they came in and there was no menorah there. Maybe because the menorah was stolen, maybe because something else. So, sorry? It was, well, no, it was in Rome afterwards, but
There's more than
you
one
could,
menorah.
but Antiochus also took away everything he could.
There's more than one menorah in the basin.
That's true originally, but
Maybe they took one.
they took no, the Antiochus took everything he could. It was part of the heavy taxes that he put on the people, but he took everything he could. Bottom line is there was no menorah to light. So what did they do? They had 7 spades, right? The menorah had seven candles. They put 7 spades in the ground. They covered it with lead because they didn't have anything. They can't find gold right now, and they lit it. And to remember that, we light candles 8 days. Okay. How is that an answer? Like what? No, first of all, okay, no, it's 8 days because the Mizbeach took 8 days, but it's candles because they put these spades. Okay, but they maybe also lechem apanim they didn't have. Also the tamid. Why is it that candles was the most? First of all, why was it so important to them? They could have come in and say, oh, we don't have a menorah. We have to wait until we have a menorah, and then we will light it. In the meantime, what should we do? We don't have it. But it was so important to them that they put these spades in the ground and they light it. And to commemorate this, their dedication to lighting the candles, even though they didn't have a menorah, we light them 8 days. So my question is why were they so dedicated? And why is that dedication is what we want to remember? Because yes, and therefore
see the special like a
okay. But that all those midrashim, it's true, but those midrashim are
Could it be?
You're reading it according to the midrashim. You're not reading it right. It's not the.
Could it be a?
So we want to get to those midrashim.
Could it be a message of Me'al Hatava, Shmonos Me'al Hatava, and like? Don't think that was a military victory just by Ben Adam. It was Me'al Hatava.
Okay, that is not the answer that this Braita is giving. It says it took them 8 days. They put shipudim. This Braita is definitely not Me'al Hateva. It's very down to earth, very very down to earth. But why candles? According to this explanation, I want to know.
Light.
Sorry?
Light.
So you're saying light, there's something important with light. Okay, so I think you're right. But what is so important with light and why? So that is what I want to get at. So there is a beautiful Meshech Chochma on he talks about Pesach, but then from Pesach he goes to Hanukkah. And he says like this. I'm now on the second page on line 19. Beginning of line 19 on the second page. כל העמים בדתותיהן הנימוסיות יעשו יום הניצחון, יום הפלט אויבים, לחוג חג הניצחון. Okay, he says, all nations, they have victories that they celebrate, days that they celebrate over their enemies. And usually the days of victory, those are their festivals. Lochen be'Yisrael. But no, our Hagim are not about army victories. It's not about being happy when our enemies were defeated. That is not what we're happy for. So therefore, on Hanukkah, we're not celebrating the victory. That's not what we celebrate. Meaning, before we get to Hanukkah, look at all of our other Hagim. And he says the same about Pesach. He says on Pesach, we don't celebrate the fact that Hashem gave Eser Makot to the Egyptians. That's part of the story, and we mention it. But when the Torah mentions Pesach, it's Chag Yetziat Mitzrayim, meaning we focus on what happened to us. We came out of Egypt. What happened to Egypt, that's a different story, but that is not what the festival is all about, says the Meshech Chochmah. So too in Hanukkah, he says, we had a victory, but the Chag is not about the victory. We had to have the victory because in order to achieve what we had to achieve, in order to establish ourselves as a free nation that can serve God, we had to have a victory over those who were trying to prevent us from doing it. But when we have now the festival is not on, oh, we managed to crush those people that wanted to do that to us, and that is why we're happy. No. That's not our focus. So he says, and I'm on line 22 now. ולכך על נס חנוכה אין היום מורה רק עד הדלקת שמן זית וחינוך בית השם וטהרתו. What we celebrate is the lighting of olive oil and the dedication of the house of Hashem and its purification. והשגחת אלוקים על עמו בית ישראל בזמן שלא היה נביא וחוזה בישראל, ולכן נעשה הדלקה על עניין בלתי מפורסם. Okay, goes on, we won't read everything, but he says the celebration is not about the great victory, but about the small miracle that happened in the temple. Okay, but I want to...
You read that it could be staying in the mission, the big celebration was about the military victory. That later on, the miracle of the oil came first, but in ancient times, the military victory, it seems, was the big thing.
And
oh, is that, oh, yeah,
if you want to say that, you need to bring sources to back that. Okay. Now it could be, but that is not what the Meshech Chochmah says. The Rambam might take take your direction, but even according to the Rambam, even according now you basically got to my next stage. I asked a question, and the Meshech Chochmah begins to address that question, but I want to, before I give it a better explanation, because right now we're perplexed. What exactly does he mean? I want to explain what I think he means. But before we get there, I want to now go back to our version. And my question, according to the version that the Gemara brings, the miracle of Hanukkah, of 8 days, the question is this: why did we need that miracle? Meaning, we just had this great victory over the Hellenists. We were able to dedicate Beit HaMikdash. And now we will be able to freely serve Hashem. That's great. Why did Hashem make this superfluous miracle? What's its purpose? What for? And not only why did he do the miracle, but why did he choose that the miracle should be with the candles? For instance, maybe the miracle should be with the Mizbeach. As we saw, it took them 8 days to put together the Mizbeach. So make a miracle and have the Mizbeach put together in 1 day. Wow, now we know that Hashem is with us. The Mizbeach was put together in 1 day. So we have two questions. A, why miracle? And if there is a miracle, why candles? So in other words, even according to our version, I'm now asking, so fine, why do we light 8 days candles 8 days? Because there was this great miracle. Okay, but why? Why was there a miracle? And if there was a miracle, even once there was a miracle, why with candles? Right? So you see, the question could be asked also according to our version. It's not only according to this version, why candles? Who cares that they put those spades in the ground? Why is that the most important thing? But also according to our version of the miracle, why is the miracle dafka? Why did we need a miracle, and why dafka with candles? So here, I think it has to do with something that is written in Zechariah. We read this part of Zechariah on Shabbat Chanukah, and Zechariah is one of the last Nevi'im of Am Yisrael. And Zechariah is there when Hashem tells the people, when the Nevi'im tell the people it's time to go back and rebuild the temple. And Zechariah has this revelation about the second temple being built. And Zechariah tells to us, and I'm now reading in line 31, in the second page. Zechariah has this vision where an angel is shaking him to wake up. And he says, what do you see? I see a golden menorah and something on its head, and the seven candles are on it. It has seven lit candles. There are two olive branches with it. One to its right, one to its left. And I ask the angel who's speaking with me, what are these, my Lord? And he tells me, don't you know what these are? You know. And I say, no, I don't know. The leader of the people who went to Eretz Yisrael before Ezra and Nehemiah, his name was Zerubbabel. And it was very difficult for them. They were a small group, and they had problems with the other people who were sitting there in the land of Israel, and the empire wasn't always in their favor. It was very difficult. So the Hashem is telling Zechariah, go tell Zerubbabel, lo b'chayil velo b'choach. It is not through might and not through strength. Ki im beruchi, amar Hashem tzvakot. I'm going to deliver you, not through might or strength, but through my spirit. And this is one of the last prophecies of a Navi to the people of Israel. Not through strength, not through battle, but through the spirit of Hashem. And from this moment onwards, it was the most quiet era for the Jewish people for the next few centuries until the story of Hanukkah. There was never such a time to the people of Israel that for a few centuries, there are no wars, there are no battles, and things are more or less going okay. We don't know of anything that went terribly bad during these years. Beit HaMikdash is in its place. Yes, they're under the Persian Empire, and later under the Hellenists, Alexander the Great comes and conquers the whole region. But they're okay under him, and then under Ptolemy, his successor. It is only the Seleucidites, the Antiochusim from the north that start to drive them crazy. But that starts much later, and until that time, they live in tranquility and quiet and peace. Now, all of a sudden, comes Matityahu and starts fighting. And it's not only fighting, it's fighting his own people. The main Hanukkah battles, the first ones, were not against strangers. They were against other Jews. Yes? It was a civil war. There were those that wanted to be pagans, like to totally adopt the Hellenistic culture. And there were those like Matityahu and those that were with him that said, no, we're not for this. We're not going to lose our identity. We're going to retain it. And now, the Hashmonaim, for the first time, after centuries of peace and tranquility, they pick up the sword. They must have had a question that went through their mind. Are we doing the right thing? The last thing that our Navi told us was, Lo b'chayil velo, what was it? Lo b'koach velo b'chayil ki im beruchi, amar Hashem tzvakot. And there was that menorah vision that represented the spirit of Hashem. And then they fight, and they come on the 25th of Kislev. They come with their armored guard into the Beit Hamikdash, with their sword dripping with blood and everything else. And they're not, are we doing the right thing? Are we not? And comes the story of the Nes Hanukkah, and all of a sudden they have this miracle, and they say, wow, Hashem is definitely with us. Because it's not only a miracle, it's a miracle with the menorah. Menorah Zahav Vegulal Rosha, the same vision that Zechariah has, and that Hashem's spirit is what is guiding them. Then yes, now we were forced to use force, but Hashem's spirit is still with us, because look at the miracle. And according to the other version, maybe there was no miracle, but they're still dedicated to Hashem's spirit. They come into the Beit HaMikdash, and the first thing that they do is just, man, there is no menorah. What are we going to do? They take these spears, and they're so dedicated to lighting candles, they put these spears instead of the menorah to say, yes, we are forced to fight, but we have these spares. We are lighting candles because we want to make sure for everyone to understand, and for us to understand, that this is for Ruach Hashem, for the spirit of Hashem that we are fighting, and we want to make sure that the spirit of Hashem is still with us. So to celebrate Hanukkah, from then on, we choose the menorah, we choose the nerot, because they represent Ruach Hashem. Meaning, like the Meshech Chochmah says, yes, we had victory, but that is not the main thing. The main thing is the spirit of Hashem that was with us through that victory and is still with us today. And that is why in the last source, I'm not going to read it, but I'm going to tell you, the last source it tells us that all the dates of Megillat Ta'anit do not apply today. However, Hanukkah still applies. Hanukkah and Purim. Purim we won't discuss today, but Hanukkah I am going to discuss. Why is it that we don't celebrate all those days that were in Megillat Ta'anit? Because they all had to do with celebrating happy days that had to do with the Second Temple. But now that the Second Temple was destroyed, then those days are not happy anymore. They're actually sad days, because they just remind us of what we don't have. But just a minute, isn't that true about Hanukkah as well? Yes, it is true about Hanukkah as well, but Hanukkah has the other thing. It has that Ruach Hashem. It has that menorah. When we light the menorah, it reminds us of Hashem's spirit. And like the Hashmonaim when they were fighting and they didn't know, is Hashem still with us? They saw the menorah, or they lit the menorah, and that reminded them that Hashem is still with them. So too, our ancestors, throughout this long and cold winter of history, when we were in the Galut, then our ancestors went through periods when they were asking themselves, is Hashem still with us? We went through such terrible times. I always say this, and you might have heard me saying this many times, but I'll still say it again. For us to have faith in Hashem today, it's so easy. We see so many miracles. We see these great things that are happening to our people with all the difficulty. We see these miracles, and it's easy for us to have faith and to believe in Hashem. But sometimes I question my ancestors, like what went through their mind? How could they still have faith in Hashem? Those who lived during the Crusades, and those who lived during those dark ages of terrible days of when the Jewish people went through so much, and they still held on to Hashem. I mean, we read of the things that you read of Baalei Tosfot, what they went through, and it like Judaism was literally flickering like a candle in the light, and that would go out just like that, and they still held on to it. So that candle represents exactly Ruach Hashem. And those are the candles of Hanukkah, and those are the candles that our ancestors lit even during the Galut, because that is exactly what Hanukkah is all about. So why candles? Well, that is why candles. So, Be'ezrat Hashem, next week, I'm going to discuss again the 8 days, and we're going to see other reasons why 8 days. It's not going to be against what we saw today, but we're going to see more, even more about the 8 days. Bezrat Hashem next week.
Yeah.